A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you all for joining us today with Minhaj Brothers UK, which is a branch of Minhaj Quran International UK. And we've got a very important topic that we want to discuss. It's something that we've all been thinking about. It's something that we've either heard about, we've either witnessed, or we either know somebody struggling with, and that is mental well-being during the pandemic. Now, we know that when coronavirus kicked off last year in March, or take it back to January, when the coronavirus was being discussed in Wuhan, we never expected that we would be living under lockdowns. We never, in my lifetime, I think many people's lifetimes, in fact, everyone, we haven't experienced social distancing. We haven't experienced living in these sorts of conditions, and we never expected to live in these sorts of conditions. But it was by the sake of Allah that these things happen, and coronavirus reached the UK. We remember seeing it reach Europe, and suddenly it hit the UK, and we were living in lockdowns, living in new conditions which were unnormal, which were not normal for many people, which were difficult because of the restricted activity, the restricted freedom. But they were the needs of the time because of our health, because to protect our health, to protect the National Health Service, to protect the health of others, we had to continue with these kinds of conditions. But that also meant that there was added effects, there was added impacts on many things, and mainly what we're talking about here today is the impact on the mental well-being during the pandemic. So in today's program, we have a group of illustrious panelists. I must say they come from a range of backgrounds, talking about mental health from different angles. And it's an interesting discussion that we're going to try to debate and discuss today, and try to ask what are the issues that many people face with mental health issues, how they can get that support, what kind of access do they have, what kind of problems are people seeing in the community, especially related to young Muslims out there. And so let's not wait any longer. Let's start inviting the guests on there today. I'm delighted to have, first and foremost, Maria Mahmood, who's the director of Muslim Youth Helpline. She's with us today. She's been the director since 2020, the year of coronavirus that we sadly had to witness, and we're taking part in right now as well. But Maria previously worked in the UAE in strategic communications, managing government relation projects spanning in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. So she has a real grasp on some community issues related to some cultural backgrounds, especially those in the subcontinent. She's interested in encouraging conversations on mental health within the Muslim community and the importance of cultural appropriate care. And Maria is here today and we'll talk about the work she does with Muslim Youth Helpline and the support she gives, but also some of the live experiences that she witnesses on a daily basis in her work. I'm also honored to be joined today by Sheikh Tahir Mahmood Kiani, who's a graduate of International Islamic University in Islamabad. He studied in various places and under various scholars around the world. He's taught in Islamic institutes in the UK, as well as lectured in colleges, universities, and academic establishments. He's also translated various books on Islamic jurisprudence, beliefs, morals, tasawwuf, Quran, and many other topics. And as somebody who's bought one of them books, I can say he's an illustrious author that I have direct contact with. So I'm great to say that. And he's also currently a director at Minhaj College. We've also got with us today Dr. Zaid. Now, Dr. Zaid is a consultant in occupational medicine, which is a branch of medicine dealing with prevention and management of work-related diseases. He qualified in medicine in 1992, and after practicing in the NHS in various specialties as a junior doctor, including accident and emergency, he came into working in this field. So he's really had hands-on experience working with people who face mental health issues, who face difficulties in work, and also leave work. So clearly, we've got a wide range of panelists joining us today, and I'm hoping that we can have a wide-ranging discussion. So first of all, assalamu alaikum to you all. Thank you for joining us. Let me start with you, Maria. Just give people listening today an insight about what is Muslim Youth Helpline, what is it that you guys do on a day-to-day basis, and what does it have linked with mental health?
Walaikum salam. Thank you for that very kind introduction. So Muslim Youth Helpline, we've been running for 20 years. We are a national free confidential support service for young people, and particularly vulnerable young people in the UK who need support. Now, we provide a faith and culturally sensitive emotional support service to these people. We have you can contact us by phone, email, WhatsApp, live chat, and we're free for young people to access us from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day. Now, we have helpline officers on the shifts every day, and what they do is they create a safe space for young people that they can talk to us anonymously about some of their mental health concerns or some of the other concerns that they may not feel they can have. They can speak to anywhere else, and we create that space for them, and we speak to them, and we guide them, and we support them. And if after our support services we feel like they need additional support, we are there to provide them with signposting to other organizations. So what we essentially do is give them a safe space to speak, and then if we think they need further support, with their encouragement as well, we're able to link them with other organizations. Now, those other organizations can be, for instance, if someone comes to us with an addiction and they need additional support, we've given them the emotional support provided, and then we're able to signpost them to other organizations. They may feel like they're going through an issue, and then on top of that they may have religious guilt that they're suffering from. We're able to signpost them to masjids and imams. They may have debt issues, and we're able to signpost them to financial organizations as well. So we are essentially the first point of call for a lot of young people who've not ever spoken about their mental health before.
Well, thank you for that, Marie. You mentioned also people who have sometimes religious guilt. I'm going to come to Sheikh Tahir Kiani. Sheikh, people talk about religious guilt. Where is the role of Islam in all of this? Islam is a deen, it's a way of life. But many people sometimes feel as though when it comes to these things, maybe Islamic scholars aren't the right people to talk to, or maybe Islam has nothing to do with this. What do you have to say on this, Sheikh Tahir?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mental health itself is, I wouldn't say it's related to religion, but it does have certain solutions in religion itself, in Islam especially. The Quran, it mentions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That loosely translated, that the Quran has the shifa for all illnesses. So it's only up to us to actually find them directly or indirectly, or there are references to remedies in the Quran that we can find elsewhere. There are many instances in the history of Islam itself where mental health has been treated through religion itself, and the life of the beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam even shows that mental health is just as common as physical health, except that it is not spoken as much of. Let me just give you an example. Well, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he received the first revelation, the very first wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, on the first five verses of Surah Al-Alaq. After he received them, he came straight home. Remember, he used to go to the cave of Hira and stay there as in seclusion and meditate and think about the problems of the society. And then when he was given these revelations, he was already expecting this. He was already expecting this, and we know from historical accounts that there are various narrations that the Prophet ﷺ was aware that at some point the angel Jibreel is going to come and give him these verses. But why did the Prophet ﷺ come straight home? And he was sweating in cold sweats, and his heart was pounding so hard that Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, his blessed wife, said it's as if it was about to just come out of his chest. But anyway, the Prophet ﷺ came home and he said to her, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, cover me up, cover me up. And she covered him up and everything, and then he told her what had happened. So he was basically telling her his anxiety, not that he was worried of being given this particular mission, but he was worried that how will I fulfill it? That was the anxiety, because this is such a huge mission. So anxiety is, as some would say, is one of those mental health issues that can lead to other mental health issues and physical health issues as well. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right from that very moment, has taught us that whenever you face any form of difficulty, go and ask others for help, especially those people whom you trust. Especially those people whom you trust, speak to them, talk to them about that. And this is shown through the very first, in the revelation of the very first ayah of the Quran, where the Prophet ﷺ, through his own example, is showing us this is what we should do. There are other instances as well where a particular companion of the Prophet ﷺ, his name was Tha'laba, he did something which was not appropriate, and then later he felt that guilt, which Sister Maria was saying regarding this particular guilt. He felt this guilt and he thought, oh no, a revelation is going to come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's going to find out what I have done. Oh no, what am I going to do? So that feeling of guilt, it really broke him. It almost destroyed him. He left Medina, he left the city of Medina, and he went away into the mountains, and he stayed there. And the Prophet ﷺ was looking for him, and he asked, he says, oh Umar, oh Salman, go and find him. And then they went and looked for him, and after 40 days they found him. They brought him back, and he was weak. He was very, very ill. So which goes to show that mental illness does have an effect on our physical being as well. And that was all because of that anxiety again. And all of that, you could say, was depression as well. Like, astaghfirullah, what have I done? The Prophet ﷺ is going to find out about it. The noble companions are going to find out about it. All the Muslims will know about it, because it will become a part of the Quran. Until the end of time, everybody will know about this bad thing that I have done. Astaghfirullah, how am I going? So that feeling of guilt, it actually destroyed him. And just says that when he returned, he was actually carried back by the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He was carried back because he was so weak. And when he came back, when he was returned, just after a couple of days, he passed away. So it just goes to show that mental illness, how severe it can be. It was really disastrous to him and devastating. And it is just as difficult today as well.
Yeah, if there's any cricket watchers out there, people who watch cricket, usually in a 2020 game, the sixes come at the end. But I think Sheikh Tahir Kiani just hit the sixes in the very first over. He's mentioned the fact that the anxiety's been, usually the discussion starts off quite slow, but it's good that we've hit the ground running. That anxiety was something, in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, if the companions of Rasulullah ﷺ also faced this anxiety. So if people today are facing this anxiety, we're facing nothing different. If the people who are the best of creation, they're the best of the ummah, they face these issues, and it's no different from us, especially from a religious perspective. So thank you for that big six starter. I'm sure it's hit many people like it's hit me. Moving on to Dr. Zahid, I just want to get this discussion opened up as well, because we've got some interesting different perspectives. Again, we've heard a theological perspective from Sheikh Tahir Kiani. We've heard about the hands-on approach, speaking to young people, and the importance of a safe space. But Dr. Zahid, a report on mental health in 2015 found that almost £5.4 billion is lost to the UK GDP because of people who either leave the workforce or go part-time in the workforce because of mental health related issues, or looking after somebody with mental health related issues. You've worked in the A&E departments, you've worked in the hospitals. How much of a growing issue is mental health? And bearing in mind, we're talking at a time when we've got probably the biggest public health pandemic going around the world, and public health is on everybody's mind. How important is mental health for people's lives, the jobs, but also the economy around us?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for inviting me, and for Minhaj Brothers on setting up this really, really important seminar. It's not just for this time, but for all time, because mental health is a major issue, as you say, Brother Mubin. Particularly in my practice, as you say, I would say around maybe even over 50% of the cases that I see in my clinics are mental health, and they may relate to work-related issues. For example, feeling pressured or stressed. Sometimes people are feeling bullied at work, and that has an impact on their well-being. But at the same time, I see lots of people with problems in their personal lives, family problems, financial problems, as the sister mentioned. Debt is a major concern. Drug and alcohol problems, so substance misuse. So these are all problems that have a major impact on people's mental health. And as you say, it is an increasing problem. I mean, there was a survey done by the NHS, in fact, last year, and it related to young people, that now they estimated from surveys that they've done that around 1 in 6 young people have a probable diagnosable mental health condition, whereas just a few years ago it may have been as low as 1 in 10. So the problem seems to be getting worse, and there may be different factors around that. There is certainly more awareness of mental health issues, so people are a little bit more ready to talk about them, and so these things are identified. But I think that there are other perhaps increasing pressures, particularly on young people. For example, I think social media has a part to play. There seems to be a lot of cyberbullying going on, and I think there's a new issue, or relatively new issue, of body image problems. So influencers kind of portraying what the ideal sort of physique should be, and people can't readily live up to those sort of unrealistic standards of beauty, and that applies to both young men as well as women. I think for young people these days, they are quite under a lot of pressure. I mean, let's leave aside the pandemic. You've got exam pressures that probably we never had. Well, I certainly never had as when I was growing up. There's also issues to do with social networking. Just from my experience, when I was growing up, we used to go out and play with friends and so on, and we learned things. We learned how to succeed. We learned how to fail. We learned how to interact with our peers. I think these days, young people don't seem to have as much opportunity to go out and mix with their peers. That they're usually stuck indoors, maybe on social media. So I think that there are unique pressures on young people, which I think probably explains why there is a rise, and not just for young people, but also older adults, middle-aged people. So there is, as you say, it is an increasing problem to do with many different factors.
I think that's follows on quite nicely, but I just want to give a quick reminder to everybody who's watching either live on Facebook or YouTube. One thing you can do is press the like, the share button, and pass this message on, because there might be somebody out there who's suffering from mental health illnesses, who might have the anxiety, that doesn't want to talk, and they may be able to talk to one of our guests off the show, whether it's whether it's Muslim Youth Helpline, whether they want to get an Islamic perspective, or even open up a discussion to realize what's taking place. So please do like and share this page, and feel free to ask questions. I know there's some questions coming through, and I'll ask them individually. Now, Dr. Zaid mentioned there's many factors. Social media is a factor, Maria. There's factors that young people are facing. I'm going to ask two questions in one, if I'm able to. The first being, look, social media is clearly a factor that many generations didn't face. And with that, we find a lot of the older generations mentioning stuff like, for example, the snowflake generation, about young people who are struggling with these sorts of things. How helpful are these kinds of taglines for young people, firstly, Maria? And secondly, is there a problem with, for example, cuts? We know there's been 773 youth centers closed down in the last decade, libraries, sorry, 750 youth centers, and we've had cuts to education and other sectors. How much has that impacted on the lives and services that young people can access? So there's two questions in one there for you, Maria, if you'd like to add to that, please.
Thank you for your questions. You know what? There are so many reasons why there has been a rise in mental health concerns amongst young people, and I mean, you've spoken about some of those cuts, and they have had a trickle-down effect on young people. What are they doing? So, for instance, if you take one young person, for instance, and they don't have a safe space to speak at home, their only access to support services would be schools and other engagements with other support services. Now, if you're cutting those support services, you're almost cutting the access for that young person to get help. if we look at the lockdown and some of the causes of mental health during lockdown, young people, the loss of routine, the loss of school networks, the loss of uni access, these are all playing a huge role in why young people are facing more mental health concerns. Now, some of the types of mental health concerns that have recently come into our helpline are things like isolation and loneliness, and these are amplified during the many lockdowns we've had. Young people are the most likely to be impacted by unemployment because of those lockdown measures. Now, they're the group that will be the most impacted. You also have young people who are at home at the moment at risk of more abusive relationships because, they are at home and not being exposed to the outside world where they would have had, let's just say, a respite or being able to access other services that could have supported them. And those other services are not accessing these young people. That you aren't accessing your normal coping mechanisms that you would have done as a young person. And that could be going to school, speaking to your wellbeing officer at school, other activities that you would have done throughout the year. You're not tapping into those. And especially young Muslims. Now, for us, we have a huge network in terms of the community, and suddenly that community has been cut off from us because of lockdown measures. The Muslim community in general has been highly impacted by COVID fatalities, and that has had an impact on how do young people bereave. Lots of young people have lost parents, grandparents, relatives, and how are they processing that bereavement? And that's a huge issue, and that's one of the biggest concerns coming into the helpline, trying to grieve, but trying to identify how to grieve when we don't have the support services. And then the unknown. So young people from a very young age, you have a routine, and that routine starts from school, when you come back from school, and the kind of after school activities that you do, all of that is a routine for young people, and they thrive off routines. Now, with the lockdown, there's so many unknowns. That routine has been taken away from them. There's lack of clarity, and the government hasn't been very clear on what the next steps are. I mean, last year's exam period and the exam results, and that was a shambles. Young people did not know what to do with themselves. They didn't know whether they were going to go to university or they were going to defer a year. All this lack of clarity is very it has a knock-on effect on young people. And also the change in roles at home. A lot of young people have taken on carer responsibilities since the lockdown, parents being sick, parents being on furlough, the financial concerns that they've had at home as well. So, I mean, these are just some of the few causes of mental health concerns. And I mean, we speak about some of those cuts, but, right now it's an even graver situation because of lockdown measures, and those cuts have just been amplified.
I think you mentioned a lot of things, and Sheikh Tahir, I want to bring you in here as well. And probably we might have a bit of back and forth on this topic. But how much, if you look at many of the root issues to mental health issues that we're hearing about right now, whether it's poverty, whether it's unemployment, whether it's people feeling unhappy, whether it's distress, whether it's about losing a loved one, whether it's people feeling unhappy about themselves, the situation they're in. Of course, they're very real issues they face. But is there a link to spirituality? Is there a spiritual cure that Islam provides that is unique to many other types of religions or different groups? And because faith is so important for many young Muslims, firstly, do you think Islam has got a cure? And secondly, do you think imams and mosques and Muslims as a whole have played that role effectively in recent times? Or in many ways, have they been to blame by kind of shutting it away? And there's a question on screen here from Usman Shah. He says that I've come across people with cases of mental health, but some Muslim families tend to blame it on jinn, being possessed, or victims of the evil eye. How do you tell it's mental health and not nazar? And it all comes into one, doesn't it? So the first question about has Islam got a cure, about feeling about spirituality, about life itself. But secondly, do you think practitioners in the Muslim world, the imams and scholars or so-called practitioners, have they often mistreated this illness and made it into something else, and therefore young people have lost the confidence and trust sometimes?
Yeah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Thank you for that question. Well, number of questions. Islam, I wouldn't say it has the cure, because Allah is the one who has provided the cure, whether we follow it or extract it through Islamic sources or otherwise. But the cure is there. It's in this world, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has sent down the cure with the illness. And there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in Sahih al-Bukhari. I'm trying to find the words now, that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever illness he has sent down, he has also sent down its cure with it. Its cure with it. Some of you might, I think Dr. Zahid might remember, when we used to play outside, cricket, football, whatever, and sometimes we used to fall into nettles and come out all itchy and all spots and rash and everything. And right next to the nettles, the bunch of nettles, okay, you'd find a certain type of leaf, okay, which
dock leaf.
Dock leaf, yeah, which
Yeah.
looks like what we say in Desi style, palak, yeah, looks like a spinach leaf, yeah. We used to just break that and just rub it, and there you go. So you've got the cure right next to the harm. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has revealed into this dunya the shifa with the illness, because the illness itself, it's helpful. The illness is itself helpful for us, okay, because it improves our immune system and many other things as well. But the shifa is essential as well, because everybody's not the same. So the shifa, we have different doses of it and different types as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the shifa, but we don't say that the shifa is in Islam or the shifa is in the Quran. We say that Islam, the Quran, hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and many of the sayings of the noble Sahaba and other scholars, they guide us towards the shifa, they guide us towards the cure. So if we are going to go to a GP, it does not have to be a Muslim GP, it can be a non-Muslim GP as well, because the shifa Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in the world, not just in the Quran itself. So the Quran guides us towards that. With regards to the masjids, I'd like to say that a masjid is not supposed to be just a place of worship. That is what we have made it out to be nowadays. Masjid is, you could say, it's bigger than the town hall. It is bigger than the city, what do you call it, magistrates and hospital and everything put together. You see, masjids have always been used for multiple purposes. So the masjid is much bigger than all of them. So it should be a place of not only spiritual remedy, but also for help with physical ailments as well. Every masjid should have some sort of facility for that as well. And I know, I think it was in Syria a while back where I went, where there was actually a masjid, and right next to it was the pharmacy. In fact, the pharmacy belonged to the masjid. There was a GP belonged to the masjid, and all these places, Hijama Center and Ruqya and everything, all belonged to the masjid itself. So something like that in the UK would be very, very helpful. Unfortunately, I'd like to say, unfortunately, most of the imams we have are not equipped to assist with mental health. A lot of the time they will just say, which is wrong in many ways, to say that have sabr, have some patience. No, that is not the cure. That is like pushing somebody away. Have sabr, have patience. How does it do that? Every illness has a different form of remedy, and every sort of difficulty that we face has a different form of sabr. So all imams, okay, can say that, but not every imam is equipped to help with mental health. One of the solutions would be to have imams given some sort of training on mental health, how to recognize it, how to identify it, and how to maybe even speak to someone who has that, because it has always been very, very difficult for people to speak about mental health. It's easier when you have a physical ailment, you've cut yourself, you can tell someone, look, I've cut myself, what do I do here? But when someone has an illness inside their head, it's very, very difficult. And like someone mentioned, I think it was Sister Maria who mentioned that a lot of times it's a society that blames the patient. And then, like the brother mentioned, that when they blame the patient, it's mainly in societies where you will find a lot of emphasis on beliefs in witchcraft, jinn possession, and other supernatural causes. That does not really help. We do believe that they have some influence, but just bending that way, totally, that does not help. We need to be able to relate to the individual regarding the root causes of what might be that particular for that particular illness that he is suffering, and then deal with it appropriately.
Sheikh, I'm going to leave you there. Maria, just talking to you, Mari, sorry. is this something you hear about? Do young people ever come to you and say, okay, I've got mental health issues, but I spoke to somebody that said it could be related to supernatural causes? Or do you, for example, in your work, find it easy to access many religious practitioners? Because there is a link. There's, for example, we're seeing right now with the COVID vaccine, the role that Muslim imams are playing is huge, because they are the people that give confidence to many communities, as well as people in different religious communities. So is this something that you see in your workplace, you hear firsthand, or is it something that we're just talking about today?
Firstly, I want to say that the reason you may ask, why does a Muslim youth helpline exist? And the reasons why we exist is that we understand that it's so appropriate to have faith and culturally sensitive support services for young people. Now, these young people aren't tapping into mainstream services because, number one, it's very hard for them to talk about for young people to talk about mental health support and their mental health illnesses. And number two, when they do choose to identify with who they want to speak to, those mainstream services don't seem most familiar to them. Now, when they're speaking to someone at Muslim Youth Helpline, that individual is Muslim. That individual is from a BME background. Now, the young person can use terminology freely, and the other person would identify with them and let them speak. And we want to make sure that you're just talking about whatever your concerns you are. You're not thinking, oh, I wonder if this person understands. Should I have used that word? And that's what we provide. Now, when we look at some of the primary concerns coming into the helpline, and we ask young people, what are the next steps? They do want to speak to someone who's going to help them with their mental health concerns. That might be a therapist. That might be another helpline. That might be a community worker. That might be loads of other organizations. But they, at a very high number, ask to speak to an imam or someone in a masjid. They want to take care of their mental health, but at the same time, a lot of them are identifying with, I need to ask questions about why this is happening, or what is happening in my household. Is this allowed? So many questions about is this okay in Islam? Now, we're not well positioned to answer those questions. Number one, as a helpline, we do not give advice. We're only there to provide emotional support. And our numbers are telling us that young people do want to be connected to masjids. They do want to be connected to imams. And that's why, we work with lots of masjids, and we're supporting them to when we do signpost these young people to them, so that they can help support them. Now, what we've recently found is one of the masjids that we were working with, they called us up and they said, we're inundated with calls. We're not just supporting young people, but we are getting the community is under a lot of stress during COVID. We have so many functions, and like what's previously said on the panel, that the masjid has so many functions, and we need to identify them. And masjids aren't greatly funded. The people that work there aren't greatly funded, and for some people, they are the cornerstone of society. And we've seen that impact recently with the masjids being closed, how impactful that was for the Muslim community. Now, that masjid has so many reasons why they exist, and so many functions for the community, and we're not investing in them. And if young people want to speak to imams and want to speak to go to their local masjid, why aren't we training people that are forward-facing, who are frontline workers? I consider them frontline workers for young people, for the community. Why aren't we engaging with them? So it's so vital that if you have a role to play and you're a frontline worker within the Muslim community, that you are able to understand what it means to have a mental health concern, can safeguard issues, are able to signpost appropriately, are able to be non-judgmental in your approach when you are dealing with young people. All of these things are very, very important. So they are very key skills that a lot of people need. So I hope that's answered your question.
Well, we'll let the people be the judge of that, and I'm sure it has. But moving nicely on to Dr. Zaid now. Dr. Zaid, one thing we've realized, and I think Sister Mari's mentioned this as well, is a lot of people are losing their jobs in this pandemic, and that's having an adverse effect on the whole family. Now, if you are somebody with one person being the breadwinner, whether it's the mother or the father, who's bringing the income into the family, and sadly has suddenly lost their job, and we're not moving into a market where there's going to be many jobs out there, it'll be hugely impactful on the whole family. Now, is this something that you're realizing working with people who are losing job, losing hours? Is this the kind of stresses that you find? And what are the kind of effects and impacts it has on families and also the person itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I want to just, I think it's really important as to point out that there's a spectrum in terms of severity of mental health issues. So you have anxiety and depression and many other mental health conditions, but it's important to recognize that a certain amount of anxiety or low mood is actually quite normal. So for example, if you've got an exam coming up, or if there's been some sort of life event, so you're going to react to that. You're going to be anxious. You might be low in mood for a while, but as long as it's kind of a proportionate response, then usually that's not of a major concern. Sometimes you might need to talk it through with your loved ones or your friends, or get some support just through talking or through exercise or through meditation and things like that. So, but then you get to the more severe end where the anxiety, where the low mood or other types of sort of mental health symptoms, where they start having an impact on your life, on your functioning. So on your the way you might be behaving towards in your family, it might start to have an impact on your job, that you can't concentrate on your job, that you're taking time off work because you're feeling too anxious to go in. It might have other types of impact on your life. So at that stage, if there is some disruption to your life, that is the point where you do need some help. So that is a stage where you need perhaps to speak to a doctor. I think, speak to your GPs and who are trained to recognize these issues. You can speak to your mom and so on. But as our guests have pointed out, the level of training is very variable. You get some who are more open and better able to manage mental health issues in the community. So I think it's important to recognize that. Coming to your question, yeah, I mean, somebody losing their job in the family, particularly the main provider, is going to have a major impact on not only the individual who's lost their job because they've lost their routine, they've lost their identity. If a man particularly loses their job, men, even women actually these days, they identify very heavily in what they do. So if they lose their job in whatever field they're doing, there's that loss of identity. There's a financial difficulties that then present within the family, and that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. It can cause friction between partners and within families, and that friction, that stress, because of the stress, can cause anxiety in the children, for example. So yeah, it has these sort of things have a major impact, and and I think that there are things that we can do, to prevent these things. We can, but ultimately, that's a societal issue. So governments have to be responsible for making sure that there are these safety nets for people, and that there are jobs for people to move on to. But then there's a need to deal with the outcome, the symptoms of that, and
not to cut you off, Dr. Zykes, I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up on this as well, because Sister Zainab's put a comment on. She said walking is amazing for anxiety, no matter what, whether it is fresh air, healing. And one of the sisters also agreed. Now, there is that aspect. For example, walking, as you mentioned, will get rid of some kind of stresses. But, and you do find this, that some people, when it comes to mental health illnesses, when it comes to the lower spectrum, meaning, talking to a practitioner, the therapy, the walking, this kind of stuff, the emotional support, they're okay to do it. But there does become a spectrum where people do need to take additional medicinal support. Do you believe at the higher spectrum there is a taboo within our communities? A taboo that means people don't want to go towards that kind of support, and therefore they shy away from talking about it in the first place or going to a doctor?
Most definitely. I mean, as you say, with milder forms, you can, as the sister pointed out, Sister Zainab, you can exercise, you can change your lifestyle, you can talk to people. But when you get illnesses at the severe end of the spectrum, so you get severe depression, you can get people with severe anxiety, obsessional compulsive disorders, where people have intrusive thoughts all the time that they can't get rid of. And those can be of very many subjects. And another feature of obsessive compulsive disorder, where there's a compulsion to do certain things a certain number of times, or checking behaviors or rituals. You get post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly through facing some sort of trauma in childhood, or even during any part of your life. So there's a vast range of quite serious mental health conditions. You've got psychotic disorders, so people with schizophrenia, people with bipolar disorder, who lose touch of reality. So I think there is a tendency, I think, within our communities to sometimes attribute, particularly those conditions, mental health conditions at the severe end of the spectrum, as Sheikh Yani said, to supernatural causes, to jinn and so on, which I think is totally misleading. Really, I think that's a potentially quite a grave problem, where these people actually need medical treatment. They may need medication, they may need psychotherapy. They don't need to be exorcised, through getting rid of jinn, or through whatever. They can do with some spiritual support, but certainly they do need to see a doctor, or to see a therapist quite urgently. And I think there is definitely a taboo. I think partly it's because there's this sense of shame, or there's this thing about shame or honor within sort of our communities, and I think when somebody is in that sort of situation, I think it's perceived that person is bringing shame onto their family, or some kind of dishonor. So I think that is something that I think does need to be addressed, through greater awareness of mental health, and better training of imams and other sort of community workers.
And Sheikh Tahir, now there's a question here from Usman Shah. He says, how do we go on a journey to educate the elder generation to take this seriously? I feel imams need to start the conversation via Jummah sermons. And I'm going to be quite direct here. There are some imams who do talk about mental health illnesses, and then there's others who talk about it when it becomes a kind of, a yearly event. But the reality is, when young people are facing this issue, we don't need a khutbah that come from a national organization just to read out, to tick a box. We need genuine support from imams and scholars to firstly discuss these issues, to educate the elder generation about it. But is there also a secondary issue in this? Now, in Islam, is it that, for example, the subcontinent and us, we've taken the conditions of ibadat very, very seriously? You find the person wearing the jubbah, the tasbih in his hand. But when the young person's in the mosque, when it comes to issues of muamalat, they talk with real harshness. The kind of tone they use to young people, the kind of fear young people have of going into the mosque or talking to the elderly community, the soft tone. Is that those sorts of things that have an impact on a person's mental health, that makes them go quiet, that stays in fear, doesn't want to talk to safe spaces? Also from imams as well. How can we now change this? I'm not saying the mosque is the problem. I'm saying that moving forward, dealing with these issues, how can we better equip ourselves to deal with these issues from a religious perspective, and especially in mosques?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That's a very good question. With regards to imams teaching the elders, well, like Dr. Said also touched upon that as well, that a lot of imams, they need to be provided the skills of assisting people with mental health. And the most important aspect, the most important thing, especially with among our elders and certain imams, is that they need to know that mental health exists. Some of them will just fob it off. They'll just push it aside. They'll say, no, it's nothing. And they'll say something else, or, do a self-diagnosis in the home sort of thing, which is very dangerous. We have to make them realize that this sort of illness exists. I mean, these illnesses rather exist. Okay, mental health is an issue, and we have to accept that, and we have to try and face it, and we have to try and diagnose them and help get the remedy. So that is that's a big issue. You know, now this is what I have experienced. That is a big issue. Secondly, the imams are most of the time, 80% you could say, listened to. If the imam says something and with conviction, with references from a Quranic aspect, from a hadith aspect, they are listened to. And if they say them long enough and properly, and they try and make an effort, then people will realize the seriousness of this issue, and they will come forward and they will try and assist and try and help. I was a imam very briefly in a particular masjid, and there was a prison in that particular city. And one issue that they had was that when the prisoners are released after 10 years of doing time, how do they readjust to society, especially Muslim prisoners? We need some assistance there. They cannot adjust back to family life just all of a sudden. They cannot adjust to society. They are going to cause problems, and the society is going to cause problems for them. So I contacted this particular prison, went and visited, and I said, me as an imam, I don't know about the masjid, I'll speak to them, but me as an imam, I'm willing to help. What you can do is, whoever is going to be released, I can come in and speak to them, get comfortable with them before they are released, and after they are released, they can come and visit the masjid whenever they like. So rather to mellow them into the society, you know, mildly bring them back, something like that needs to be facilitated for those with mental health as well. So if the imams can come forward, and like I mentioned, a lot of imams, they lack those skills. We have to provide those skills, and we have to have a platform, maybe on a national basis, okay, where imams can be educated in this particular field, and then they will be able to assist. And like I mentioned as well, that the elders will listen, and the elders will also come forward to help as well, inshallah.
Sister Maria, we know, we're aware when it comes to public health issues, people from Black, ethnic, and minority communities face, a wide range of health issues. In the COVID pandemic, in the first wave, they were amongst those who faced the most severe effects of COVID-19. We know there's been a history of health inequalities, a mistrust in public health services. Is this a similar case for mental health services? Is this something that you find that, for example, when it comes to mental health issues, people from Black, ethnic, and minority communities, or services that work with people from Black, ethnic, and minority communities, are sometimes at the bottom of the pecking order, and also people from these communities are sometimes facing added effects because of poverty, discrimination, racism, and all these added effects that they also face on a daily basis?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to give you a statistic, and this will probably highlight, the rise of mental health concerns amongst the Muslim and the BME community. So in 2020, from January, let's just say the beginning of coronavirus, our helpline saw a rise in traffic into the helpline by 313% from last year. So that's 313% increase in calls coming into the helpline from young people who were struggling. Now, they were struggling because we're going through a pandemic, several lockdowns, a lot of loss. That's one reason. But also, the usual coping mechanism they would have relied on no longer existed. Maybe the mainstream services they would have relied on no longer existed or felt appropriate for them. So we've seen this huge increase. And now, when you look at the BME community, there are some issues that come into our helpline that may not necessarily you will find in other communities. So, for instance, we do get a lot more calls around Islamophobia and the impacts of Islamophobia on young people, the impacts of discrimination on young people, the impacts of life chances and experiences that may impact them later on. And these always come through when the young person is talking to our helpline officers. Sometimes the young person may not be able to identify the discrimination themselves because it might not be at the forefront of why they've called us in. But when they are talking to us, loads of other issues do pop up, and we're able to discuss that as well. So yeah, these are our helplines, these other issues that may not necessarily be seen at mainstream services.
And Maria, just adding to that, if you had to give your top three or top one or two things that you think that we could, as a community, work on that would help young people with their mental health, what would you say there would be? It doesn't have to be three. It could be what do you think some of the most important ones are? And I'll go through to Dr. Zayed and Sheikh Tahir, so you have a few moments to think about that as well.
I would say start talking about mental well-being. Make it a common conversation, maybe a dinner table conversation. If you are open about, hey, I'm not having a good day today, I think I need a break, or a walk will do really good for me because you know what, I need some fresh air and I need to change up my environment. Having those types of conversations will show the younger person that actually, you know, if I'm not having a good day, it's okay, because you know, someone older than me is showing that vulnerability, and that's okay. If you create a safe space now, when that young person needs that safe space, they're able to tap into it. They know it exists. That's so important. And it's so important that when you are talking to them, you know, you are coming from a non-judgmental point of view, and you're there to just empower them and tell them that it's going to be okay, and whatever they're going through, they're not alone. There are so many avenues out there to support them.
Safe spaces are so important, especially for young people. Now, Dr. Zayed, you've worked on safe spaces with a number of other projects I know you've been involved in when it came to the peace education program as well. Do you want to slightly mention how important safe spaces are for young people in that project of yours, and then come to what you think are probably the most important things that we need to do with mental health issues as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think young people do need some structure, and they need some purpose in their lives, and some meaning. I mean, it's not just young people, but you know, particularly young people in that sort of developmental phase. I mean, they need to learn about how to deal with life, how to deal with life experiences, and anything, whether it's the peace education program, which is to do with interfaith dialogue, as well as tackling extremism. But it could be other types of activity. It could be sports activities. It could be book clubs, or other types of things that young people can get together and talk and interact in a safe way and in an open way, where they can express any concerns that they have, and where those concerns can be picked up, and any safeguarding issues picked up, or any mental health issues picked up, and those people signposted or helped or assisted. I think those are really important. I mean, just moving on to my advice to our communities, and I think Sheikh Yanni said it. There needs to be firstly a recognition that mental health problems exist, and that there is a spectrum, from anxiety, which can be normal anxiety, but all the way up to quite severe mental health problems. And it's not just a matter of telling someone, pull yourself together, or get on with it, or be patient, or be grateful, for what you've got, because those sort of things are not helpful. It's actually acknowledging that there is a problem and actually trying to do something constructive about it. And the other thing I would say to our communities is that we do, as our sister said, we need to start talking about it a lot more, and to destigmatize this problem, because there is still a big stigma around talking about mental health issues, and the more we can destigmatize it, it will encourage people with mental health issues to come forward and seek help, because that's the other issue, because that many people seem to suffer in silence. They think they're alone. It's important for them to know that they're not alone, that there is help available from a variety of sources, from, say, the Muslim Youth Helpline, to counsellors, to imams, as long as they are are properly trained, all the way up to the mental health, local mental health team. So that there's, depending on the nature of the problem and depending on the severity. So that's my general advice to the community.
And Sheikh Tahir Kiani on this issue.
I was going to say what she said, what he said, what you said. But yeah, I'd just like to add a couple of things. Once in a while, every masjid has a first aid training for its imams, for its teachers. Yeah, once in a while, I think they should include this in that as well. Maybe, obviously, they will not go to the whole degree of it and in depth, but at least they should be given enough information that they can actually speak to the congregants openly as well in Jummah prayers, that these sort of things exist. We have had our training on it, and we understand it exists. If you have any problems, you can come to us. We can give you the basic information on it, and we can send you to the right people to discuss further. So I think among the first aid training, this should also be included, inshallah. Couple of other things. One is always be with good people. Like I think Dr. Zahid mentioned, is always you hang around with good people, positive people. You will have positive thoughts. You'll be speaking about positive things. Try and find it. You might even have to leave your normal, usual friends once in a while, but try and do that, because the Quran says وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, and hang about, basically in the loose translation, hang about with those people who are good. Okay, so have a good company. And ayat of the Noble Quran, there's quite a few basically. Inna ma'al usri yusrun, with every difficulty there is ease. Speaking from a grammatical point of view, inna ma'al usri yusrun, the difficulty can be one, but the ease can be of a general nature. So if there's difficulty specific, the ease that comes out from that is going to be far beyond our imagination. That subhanallah, Allah was testing me with that, and look at what He has given me in exchange for that difficulty I went through. Okay, I'm not trying to sort of like push this away, like, just do sabr, but always be aware that Allah is always testing us. Allah tested every single prophet that He sent, and those prophets are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were closer to Him before the test, and those tests are there just to teach us that, look, if those people who are closest to Allah, those who are everything, and they were tested, who are we? We should go through, if we go through tests as well, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. So He's trying to elevate our degrees as well, inshallah, in this world or the next. And the other ayah in the Quran, وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, saying to the Prophet ﷺ, but it also relates to us as well, that every next moment will be better for you than the previous moment. Because whenever we go through any test, any difficulty, and we come out of it, it just shows that on a human level, we have gone through this test and we have come out higher. If an angel was to be put through that test, it would fail, because it just shows the difference between angels and humans. Angels are never tested. Humans are, and if they pass, they get that degree higher than angels, and that is the whole purpose of humans being tested. And most importantly, la taqnatu min rahmatillah, never feel despair, never have that despair, never despair in hope and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the most important thing. And finally, sadaqah, always give charity, always giving good things. And obviously it's going to be difficult for those people who are facing financial hardship, but giving sadaqah, giving whatever little we can. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that even if you give charity half of a date in charity, even that is a huge thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment will give you an entire mountain in acceptance for that. Just say even half a date charity. And there's a study made by the University of Zurich, and I'll just read it out. They said that helping others and being generous to them, it increases your happiness. So obviously, tasaddaqu walau bi shaqqi tamratin, give sadaqah even if it's from a piece of a date. So that does make us happy, and that will relieve us of many of our difficulties, inshallah.
And just adding to one thing that Sheikh Tahir said, you talked about this itchy plant that when you play cricket and the ball gets lost on, and just a quick nettles. It's like, why is it called the itchy plant now? I don't know what it was. And I remember just to give people a bit of guidance, that make sure you pick the right plant next to it and not the same plant you rub onto your arm, because then it could make it worse. So always get some guided support, and we've got lots of people who are here today who can give you that guided support, and they're here for that. So I just want to thank all the panelists that have been here, who've given their time to talk about this topic. I'm sure we could continue talking about the various facets of this in each specific area as well. So thank you for the participants and the guests. Also, thank you for those who are watching us, who've left us comments, and I'm sure many people will read through that discussion. It'll be helpful for them as well. We're living in a pandemic. I don't want to end with a half glass. I want to end with looking at the glass half full, not empty. And look, we're going to get through this. As Sheikh Tahir Kayani said, that the next moment is better, because this is a challenge we're facing with a pandemic. The struggles that we're going to go through, we're going to get through this. We don't know how we're going to come out of this. We keep talking about when the lockdown is going to end or when this is going to happen. The reality is, as Muslims, as believers, this is down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when He wills, we will come out of it. And if He wills, we may never come out of it. But maybe this is blessed for us as well. We should be happy with the conditions He's left us in here today. Lastly, I want to thank Minhaj Brothers UK. Minhaj Brothers UK are here for you guys. If you're facing any sorts of issues, if you want to get accompanied with good company, people who can, you can connect with, who can connect you with scholars and imams, with doctors, with the Muslim Youth Helpline, with practitioners. If you want to be with people in your own age range, then I do say drop us a message on Minhaj Brothers UK. Connect with us. If you know of anybody else who wants to connect, there's various projects of Minhaj Brothers UK that you can get involved in and connect with. And that's what you need to do. Put yourself with good company. But thank you all for joining us. We're all on this journey together. We all have ups and downs. But I pray by the sadaqah of Nabi Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we all get this. So thank you for listening and joining us today. Jazakallah khair.